And I also imagine, like, if to go back to our original topic, if you were trying to pitch the kind of movie we're talking about, what film festival would run it? I don't think any, because it doesn't fit into their template and into what they want to talk about. And that's a dead movie at that point.
Yeah, I agree. Hello, everyone. Welcome back. We are back. The Eye of the Storm podcast. I'm here with my boys Daniel and Hervé.
Yep.
Guys, let's just get straight into it, man. What stories do you wish someone would tell?
So I've kind of got two picks, and they're kind of two variations on the same theme, and they're both basically ideas. The idea that a lot of genres kind of have assumptions baked into them that kind of limit that genre, and you could tell a wider range of stories and much more interesting stories in some cases if you just went past those assumptions. And my first example of this is I want somebody to make a zombie movie that is informed by COVID. So made after COVID and informed by everybody's experiences of what that was like. Because now we know what happens in a major public health crisis, right? Where we other people are a threat to our well-being, and we can't leave our house, and where there's questions about food supply and all of these things. We always knew this, but now we know for sure that society doesn't fall apart at the first opportunity. And I would like somebody to really take that idea seriously and tell a zombie story about essentially a zombie lockdown. And that can be there are many different ways to do this. It can be from the perspective of somebody who's stuck in their apartment. It can be from the point of view of, essential workers maybe who have to go into the zombie infested city to, I don't know, keep the power plant working. Or there are so many different stories. You could even make this a TV show over many seasons and have like this ensemble where you show the situation from many different perspectives. I think it would kind of shake up the zombie genre a bit, and it would also make it more realistic, because both zombies and the post-apocalyptic genre have kind of this assumption baked into them that like society is a sham, and we are all just waiting for an excuse to kind of screw each other over and exploit each other and be generally awful people. When actually the opposite is the case. Like in a real disaster, you see all of that, right? You see looting, you see riots, you see everything, but you also see people helping each other and coming together and forming communities and so on. And that second part is that doesn't have to be the entirety of the genre, but it should be part of the equation, and it's almost never. So that's my first pitch. Second pitch is I want vampires as mob bosses. So basically the Godfather or some other mafia kind of story, but with vampires, and have them essentially act like organized crime, but as kind of the undead underworld that exists in the shadows, and that kind of runs not everything, but large chunks of a city, but has to do so kind of in hiding. And all the morality and the power dynamics and how people survive and thrive in that kind of environment, I think could be really interesting. So that's my second pitch.
Those are two very interesting ones, to be honest. The first one especially, because again, it adds to the realism, is people's lived experiences, and then kind of seeing it through a zombie apocalypse would be very, very interesting to sort of experience. And like you said, there's like literally so many different stories within it that you could tell. Because again, like you said, like the essential workers one would probably be one of the more interesting ones, because this is a person that has to like put their lives at risk to sort of maintain society and keep it going and keep it functioning and stuff like that, which would be quite interesting. That's actually a very, very good pick.
Yeah, and and then they report back to their manager who sits somewhere in the suburbs in a gated community, who has built like a fence over the summer and is now enjoying the garden. And there are all these different things that we experience during that time. And like one of the lessons I took away from COVID is how personal everybody's circumstances are, where the kind of experience you had during that time really depended on your circumstances. And it wasn't as simple as rich or poor or any of that. A lot of, like, you could be the owner of a hotel and it could ruin you, or you could have like an entry-level desk job and you would probably be fine if you could work from home, right? There were so many different factors that decided what kind of experience you had and how you experienced that time. And even very small things could make a huge difference.
I was gonna say even like stories that they do love to tell in those situations where you maybe have like a sick relative or something like that you have to like take care of in this sort of new setting. And I think we've had similar things like that in like The Purge and like The Last of Us, or in certain like instances where you had in The Last of Us TV series where you had like the boy and he had like his sort of mute little brother like that as well. So it brings up really really interesting scenarios.
Yeah, like during COVID, I knew somebody who had a bad roommate, right? Just antisocial, and that it was somebody who you could ignore during normal times. But if we were stuck with them in lockdown, that was pure hell. That person essentially risked their life, essentially, to find a new place in the middle of that, right? Because it was so unbearable, right? So there are very, very simple starting circumstances can lead to very interesting stories, I think. And I've seen it happen once. There's a Korean movie whose name I've forgotten, but where the first half is basically that, where this teenager is left in an apartment alive. Yes, that's it.
That's what I was gonna.
And it's basically about lockdown, right? But it's in a zombie scenario. But then it falls apart in the second half and becomes a regular zombie story with all the usual cliches and tropes. But the first half is very much informed by the COVID experience. But I want a story to take that completely seriously and just do just that, and then explore the different perspectives and angles that creates.
I was actually going to mention Alive as well. I was going to say, wasn't that like, similar to what you were saying? But I haven't actually finished that film. I did watch bits of it, parts. So it ends up breaking down then. So what other zombie films would you say? I don't know if there's zombie films or series. Would you say that is a zombie series that you're content with? Because I know Walking Dead isn't one.
One of the Walking Dead spin-offs is set during the Reconstruction, where people are starting to live with the zombies. But that's like a teenage drama, and I lasted about 2 episodes, and then
yeah, I know what it well.
There's one or two, like in our Hidden Gem episode, I talked about The Return, which was about people carrying the zombie virus and needing a drug, and then there's a shortage in the drug. That's kind of similar in that it's about what comes after the crisis. Right? But that's not quite the same thing.
Okay. Cool.
So as far as I know, nobody has done what I'm describing, which, it's been 4 years. It's about time.
Cool. Well, I'm a big zombie fan as well, so I'd be all for that, to be fair.
So would this ruin the zombie genre for you? Because it would be very different from most zombie stories in terms of tone and assumptions and tropes. Is just the fact that it's still about zombies still enough, or would the change in tone kind of ruin it for you?
No. I'm open to all new story types. I'm open to any new idea when it comes to zombies. Even though I have said this before, I am easily entertained when it comes to the storylines for anything that's zombie or dystopia or post-apocalyptic, because that's just my personal favorite. But I am definitely I wouldn't be against someone trying, a new thing that kind of goes away from the basic formula. Do you know what I'm saying? So I'd be all for it.
Yeah. But the zombie aspect of it is just kind of like a situation or like a premise which the story is being told, and you can tell serious stories, you can tell unserious stories. You have things like Zombieland, and you have things like The Walking Dead, World War Z, and stuff like that, which kind of all have maybe different style of tones in the movies, but it's all within the zombie universe. So I feel like there's more than enough room within it, as long as the story's solid at time.
Do you think zombie fans would be open to that though, as using zombies as a vehicle to introduce a different just using zombies as a vehicle to kind of introduce different themes and the main story? Because zombies they're like I said, they're the vehicle, but they're not the main thing about the story.
You had The Last of Us, which The Last of Us TV series. Really and truthfully, the zombies weren't an afterthought, but they weren't a main sort of part of the story. Yeah. We had enough zombie action within there, but the heart of the story is really Ellie and Joel, pretty much, and sort of the journey that they go on. And then again, the zombie is just like the setting that they're in, essentially this sort of apocalyptic world.
I haven't played the game or seen the show. Is it about the collapse of civilization, or is there more of a reconstruction thing going on?
Essentially, Ellie is the cure, basically. And it's about
trying to get from A to B, pretty much.
Yeah, trying to get from A to B, trying to get her to some of the right people who can then harness her and sort of make an antidote, basically, for the sort of zombie virus, basically. But then it's basically an unwilling father figure that has to take on this young girl and take her across the country, and then it's just the story within that and how they sort of the relationship develops basically from there. And yeah, it's that's like the main attraction to the show is that dynamic between the two of them.
But there also, just to kind of bring it back, the reason why I said would the audience be open to like a new way of telling a zombie film or series or whatever, I say that because I remember with the whole Star Wars thing where there was a series which Daniel, you said you really liked, and they kind of like, there was hardly any lightsabers in it, right? But people, yeah, exactly. But people just didn't like that, so they tried to do a new way of telling that story. So is it a thing where we think that the audience are stuck in their ways? So Harvey, you say you don't think so, right? You said people would be open to.
I think as long as I don't think people had an issue with Andor in terms of its quality. I think people just didn't tune in to it as much as they did.
People said there's no aliens, there's no Jedi, there's no lightsabers. How is this Star Wars?
I didn't. To be honest, I didn't hear that. Like any like kind of review or some of the comments I saw about it were mainly positive. But obviously, granted, I haven't seen some of all the reviews on it. But interesting to hear that take because.
Yeah, and that comes down to what you want from a genre, right? Is it specific trappings or is it bigger ideas? Because like if your idea of Star Wars is big epic space opera with larger than life heroes, then if you take the Jedi out and the Sith, is that really still Star Wars? Or is that generic science fiction that could be anything else? And I think there's something to that. But I think Andor focuses on something that is very specifically Star Wars, which is the Empire and the Rebellion. And for me, that was enough to catch my interest. And also, I've always wanted a show like this, like for decades, basically. So I was on board with the premise from the start. But if your outlook is you want space samurai melodrama, and then Andor doesn't have that.
So Daniel, do you think people would be open to the new zombie concept?
I think it would be an uphill battle, and I think it would have to sell itself on its quality and on its characters. Like if you have, what I'm envisioning is essentially an ensemble story, right, where you have a couple different people who experience the zombie crisis through very different perspectives. These characters would make the show, right? They would have to be good enough and interesting enough and multifaceted enough to get people's interest, even if in the back of their minds they think this isn't a proper zombie story because this is basically like society is still intact. Like when's the collapse coming? And it would certainly lose some people, and I think it would have to win over people on its quality, and it would still have to keep the zombies relevant enough, but at the same time not give in to the tropes of society collapsing at the first chance it gets. And I think that would be a tightrope, and you would have to be very careful about how you balance those different aspects of it. So I think it would be an uphill battle, but if the quality is there, then I think it would work.
I agree. I do think that they should introduce a new format. Look, everyone loves zombies, man. I feel like with zombies you can't go wrong. So.
But the question is, what do they like about zombies? Right? There's this whole survivalist fantasy and this whole burn society down and then we will finally be free kind of thing. Like those ideas are baked into that genre. Yeah, and if you take that away, is there enough left for people to get excited about? Like personally, for me, yes. For me, I want more stories about the reconstruction and about society persevering. For me, that was the most interesting part about World War Z, for example, the book, not the movie. But other people might think differently.
Yeah, that's true. Because that is that for me as well. That is like what gets me excited. The surviving and just being in a post-apocalyptic environment is. That is a good question. That is actually a good observation. Would people? Because I think like even though there was one zombie film it was pretty much love. Like a girl fell in love with a zombie and then the zombie fell in love with her as well. But
there's been a few of those.
Yeah, exactly. And I haven't been inclined to go and watch that. So I'm just thinking to myself, I'm saying I would want to see like a zombie film being told in a different way, but I think there has been, like for example, the example I just gave, there have been that, and I just haven't gone to watch it. So I'm just thinking.
I mean, that just sounds, to me, anyways. That sounds ridiculous, anyways. I don't know why people want to tune into something like that.
True, but I'm just thinking like, okay, so I'm like many other people in terms of what gets me excited about watching zombie films. So if I'm not watching stuff like that, then would I be inclined to watch a new format of a zombie film? I don't know. Even though I want to, but I don't know. I thought I would have wanted to, but
It would certainly have to offer something else, right? It can't be zombies minus. It has to offer something in place of the usual tropes.
I think I would. I think I would. If it was presented well in the trailer, I know you guys are against trailers, but for me, trailers are big. If it was presented well in the trailer, then I'd be inclined to definitely go watch it. More inclined to watch it.
I mean, make the trailer about an Uber driver who has to go into the big city and dodge the zombies, because that's the only job that they can get.
Yeah, that's actually pretty good. And also Zack Snyder tried to do his Army of the Dead thing in terms of like trying to do a heist in a zombie apocalyptic world.
Yeah.
So yeah, I thought that was quite. It wasn't great, but it wasn't bad. It was good. I'd say it was borderline good. It was interesting, like a new take on a zombie. You know what I'm saying, on a zombie film. I was like, okay,
that's a lot closer to traditional zombies than what I'm suggesting. But yeah, it was basically like putting the zombies into a different context. Yeah. And I think that has a lot of potential. Right? Any other pitches from you guys?
So we always hear about, whenever they like race swap a character, this, that, and the other, that why don't they just go ahead and make their own movies and create their own characters and stuff like that? And you know what? I'm all for it. I'm all for it in terms of like creating our own, especially in the fantasy world. And what everyone got really excited about online was when we were first introduced to the American Society of Magical Negroes or something like that. I can't remember the name of the movie. I remember when the trailer first came out for that, everyone was like, "Oh, cool! Like this is like a Hogwarts for like Black people, basically," and everyone was like so super hyped for it. And then we got the second trailer, and then we really found out what the movie was about, and it was about how to please white people, basically. And then everyone completely fell flat on it, and I'm sure the movie did terribly. I don't think anyone was interested in it.
It severely flopped because nobody remembers what that trope is.
Yeah,
and that's literary TV trope, but it hasn't been a thing really in 20 years.
Yeah, and I don't think, and I think it's not been a thing in 20 years for a reason, because everyone reacted so negatively to it. So, I would, my initial excitement for it was, oh, we're gonna get like almost like a Hogwarts for Black people, or so, kind of like a Fantastic Beasts, kind of like magical world where you've got basically like a Harry Potter with like Black people, and it would have been great, and we would have had like our own characters that we could have like kind of like maybe fallen in love with and stuff like that, and it could have been something similar to something like Black Panther, where it's like this kind of like hidden society, and it's similar to Hogwarts as well, where you're having to like operate on in the shadows. There's this whole like kind of like magical world away from like the regular world, and you might have like a character that's the main character that feels displaced in the world, as being told that they don't fit in anywhere, and then they discover this kind of like magical universe, and then they kind of go on all sorts of types of adventures, and it wouldn't be it doesn't need to be anything drastically different to what we've seen before in this space. Of course, you'd have to have like an interesting premise, and you'd have to have like interesting ideas behind why you're doing it, and you'd probably have to have like a story and maybe a message you want to put across, but maybe not as strong as what the American Society of Magical Negroes was trying to go for. But something like that. Honestly, like when that was first presented, I was like super excited for it, and then it just didn't materialize to what I wanted it to be. So I would love something in that vein to be done, and that's my idea.
And I don't think it would be that hard. Like a lot of fantasy is basically inspired by historical precedents, right? But it's often the Roman Empire, it's often medieval Britain. It's got sometimes it's got Slavic influences, sometimes Norse, but like especially African cultures and history are completely untapped at least as far as TV and movies are concerned. Yeah. Like you could very easily make like a Game of Thrones inspired by like the Empire of Mali, for instance, right? Or the Barbary Coast, or any like there's like dozens and dozens of like major cultures and empires and historical events throughout African history that you could repurpose in the same way that Game of Thrones repurposed the War of the Roses. Mm-hmm. Right, just sample a couple different historical events, and then kind of weave them into a fantasy story, but in a way that draws very specifically from 10th century West Africa or something. Right, just go out and see what's out there, and then get inspired in the same way that George Martin got inspired by English history. It's not hard, and I don't know why nobody's doing it.
No, and it's especially like in African culture as well. Like I can imagine there's a lot of like mythology and there's a lot of like kind of like faith-based stuff as well that you can
Yeah.
like incorporate into it as well, which would make for interesting storytelling as well. And one thing I'd love for them to do is kind of like even like advance it as well, because like even like in things like Black Panther where you've got this really advanced society, but then they still have some very like old school like traditions where like they're having to like fight for who needs to be sort of the leader of sort of Wakanda or whatever like that, and even like some of the sort of kind of like dress and clothes is still maybe it's too tied to the past as well, and maybe there's a way that they can like kind of refresh sort of the way that they visualize and capture sort of African sort of societies and African like villages and stuff like that as well in sort of a bit of a modern setting, because things have developed, things have changed from sort of what they were in the past.
And on any example I could come up with is like voodoo Haitian stuff, or something set in Louisiana or something, and then it's always a question of, okay, how authentic is it really, and how simplified and standardized is it? And I for one would love, even like an urban fantasy kind of thing set in maybe in modern day Africa, but where all the legends are real, or all the mythological creatures are real or something. Like there have been many of those stories told about Europe and about Asia and about America, and somebody could do this for various African cultures, right? It just takes somebody who knows this stuff, right? And somebody has to come along who wants to write that kind of story and who has that background and knows all that stuff intimately, and then can weave that into a good story.
The only concern that I'd have on it is just the interest and how much interest it can sort of generate, because with something like Shogun, people are in love with sort of Japanese culture. When I wouldn't say in love, but like people are sort of know enough about like Japanese culture and the samurai and stuff like that as well. People watch like many anime, so they're like fed a lot of stuff from that part of the world, and I don't feel like we've gotten enough to sort of maybe, and this is why for a period of time, and it probably a little bit controversial to say, but like you didn't really have sort of black actors as the leads in certain movies because they didn't feel like sort of black actors can carry the weight, because maybe not enough people would maybe relate to it or would have enough interest.
People are saying that about Monkey Man now, that it didn't succeed because it had an Indian cast.
Yeah.
And it's kind of hard to prove or disprove that, right?
Of course,
you only kind of look at the numbers, but you can't really explain them.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I think quality kind of wins out in the end.
Mm-hmm.
And like if I was a studio executive and somebody pitched something like this to me, I would maybe go for a smaller budget just to reduce the risk.
Yeah.
But ultimately, the show has to win over its audience, right? And it has to offer the audience something. And there will always be some number of people who don't want to watch it because of its influences.
Mm-hmm.
But most people, I think, just want a good story. Honestly, no matter what you do, you lose some section of the audience, but you have to find your audience, right? And I think the worst thing such a story would do is aim as high as something like Game of Thrones. But if it aimed a lot smaller and just started small and in a very limited scope, tried to establish its characters and its mythology, and then slowly grew, I think that would not be that risky. I don't think.
I know, and I think enough of that over time would then start to sort of kind of draw enough eyes towards those types of stories, or sort of stories of kind of like African history or African sort of culture and stuff like that. Because I feel like if it's not and again controversial to say, but if it's not like a slave movie or something related to that, then because people know about it, people like understand it, and people sort of know the history behind it, and I feel like that's why people would have a little bit more interest towards it in general. But I feel like if you start to tell a lot more of the kind of like you said, some of the wider history away from that, with enough time, I feel like you'd probably
focus on the 5,000 years before that, maybe.
Yeah, basically, yeah. Focus on all the years before that, and you'd eventually start to get enough eyes, heading towards that way.
Yeah, and you could try to find something with really striking like imagery or visuals or something to draw people's attention, and then once you have their attention, you convince them with your characters and storylines.
Yeah,
I don't see why that wouldn't work.
Yeah. Do you know where I feel like this possibly could have failed as well? Is that not to my knowledge, I don't think anyone caught the wave of Black Panther, because I feel like that was such a cultural moment and that was like such a big moment that I feel like that something else that came in with sort of high quality could have caught that wave and been a success from that. But I don't think anyone predicted Black Panther to be the success it was, or the first one, anyways.
I think trying to tell an African story that's not about colonialism is still a hard sell for the executives, and not for the audience, I don't think, but for the executives, because that's the framework in which they see it. And I think if you pitch something different than that, they would ask, "What's the point? What's the audience for this?"
Yeah, of course.
I think that's the hurdle, and it's actually kind of like the superhero movies can't have a female lead kind of thing, where you have to try, and you have to try more than once.
Yeah.
Because you're probably not going to get it right on the first try, but if you try only once or never at all, then you're not going to succeed. And if you just try a couple of times, sooner or later you're going to figure out what works.
Yeah. And you know what? I'm going to give a shout out to Michael B. Jordan as well, because I feel like he's trying to push the boat on it as well, because I know that he was maybe looking at possibly doing some type of like anime stuff. I know that he's currently casting for a movie that he's working on with Ryan Coogler, which is, at the moment, all we know about it is it's a vampire movie. And he's recruited some interesting cast, and not all of it's black, from like loads of different races. And I'm very interested to see kind of what he does in that space where it's away from your typical story that we'd normally get. So shout out to him.
And there's a few of those. I saw a movie some time ago. Essentially, it's Black Buffy the Vampire Slayer. And the villain is a black vampire that is hundreds of years old and has therefore seen all of American history. And whose attitudes and motives are derived from that, from having seen the Civil Rights era and the slavery era and the Jim Crow era and all of these things. And the movie itself is pretty stupid, but it's a great premise. If it's well done and intelligent, I would absolutely want to see that kind of story. So some attempts have been made, I think, but not a lot have succeeded.
I've always wondered as well, why is it a thing whenever we create films for ourselves, when I say as in like black films or shows, like why kind of does it always fall into the same category? Like I always look at like shows, for example, I see shows like The Boys, saying like different type of fantasy movies. I'm like, oh, the black version of this, as in like a majority of black cast of this would be so cool. How come someone from our community hasn't, kind of created something like that? So I've thought about this question. So do you guys think it's more the reason why a lot of the filmmakers are not kind of like exploring their horizons because they think it'd be a hard sell to make to people to actually financially back their movies, or do you think they're just kind of like they're just comfortable making what they know that will sell? Like they know that people are gonna watch the basic gang film or the basic film about colonialism.
I think you have to find funding, and you have to find distributors, and you have to get attention, and people have to want to talk about your movie. Like all of these steps you have to go through, and I think movies like that are kind of still pigeonholed into that one specific template. If you're not talking about either slavery or racism or something like that, then you're just not going to get that kind of attention. Because I'm pretty cynical about this stuff. I think it's because people want to make careers off of talking about that topic, basically at every step of the system. And I think if you're trying, obviously I have not experienced this myself, but I would imagine if you were trying to pitch a movie like that, you would basically not get any resonance because nobody would be able to piggyback off of that. That would be my guess.
No, I would actually agree. I think some of these executives or just some of these producers should start taking chances. Like, for example, what Jordan Peele did, like with Monkey Man. It didn't work, but it introduced a whole new version, a new culture when it comes to, film. You know what I'm saying? Because I think when it comes to Indian movies, a lot of them are. Well, to be fair, a lot of Indian movies is a mixture of action and musical theatre.
Least of all, people with Indian heritage.
That's strange.
Because it's heavily critical of India, and it's not made with Indian sensibilities in that sense, right? It's not a typical Bollywood movie at all. And I've seen some. I don't know how true this is, but it kind of makes sense to me that it's kind of like a movie without an audience. Like Dev Patel really wanted to make this movie, and not a whole lot of other people.
Yeah,
that's what it seems to have been, because it didn't make any kind of big waves. And I also imagine, like, to go back to our original topic, if you were trying to pitch the kind of movie we're talking about, what film festival would run it? I don't think any, because it doesn't fit into that template and into what they want to talk about, and that's a dead movie at that point.
Yeah, I agree.
All right, we're running a little bit long. Jonathan, what's your pitch?
Alright, I was in deep thought there. Yeah, for me, okay, it's funny enough we watched Civil War, but for me, I've always wanted a no censored story about what a civil war would look like, mainly in England, and obviously revolving, mainly around in London. Wouldn't mind if they branched out to different cities, but I think to kind of make it easier, would be, London's the most multicultural freaking city, like one of the most multicultural cities in the world. So it'd be interesting to see an accurate, no censored civil war story and what that would actually look like. Of course, when I say no censored, I don't necessarily mean they should show us everything graphically, because if it was no censored, I'm pretty sure, well, my opinion, which, by the way, when I say my opinion, I feel like this would be a good idea, because this would definitely trigger adversary and mixed opinions. Do you know what I'm saying? Like, people say, no, this is not what civil war would be like. You don't need to have more faith in humanity. Whereas the other side of people, you know what I'm saying? On the other side, people say, no, humanity is evil as hell. This is what would go down. And then you got the middle, where people, they'll agree to disagree, or they'll agree with both sides. But for me, I think, like I said, I don't think they should show it graphically in the sense of imagery, but there should be like a lot of indications of what's happening in certain scenes, but it's still accurate. You know what I'm saying? So for me, like, because we just finished watching Civil War, which was good. It was I liked it, but I felt like it was definitely it was definitely PG. I'm saying, because my thoughts on a civil war, I feel like it would be more. It would build up to be more bloody. It wouldn't be straight away bloody off the rip. So that's why I think this approach, if they were to create a new civil war film around England, I think they should show the kind of like the progression from how it starts off as a calm society and then slowly starts to deteriorate into what I think would be a whole freaking massacre, where there'll be a bunch of gated communities, and because there's different ethnic groups, demographics, I think there'll be they would explore a whole bunch. It would explore a whole bunch of topics: racism, sexism. It was like just a whole bunch.
If it's set in Britain, it would be first and foremost class, right?
Yeah. Exactly, class.
Like Britain has had 1,000 years of our continuous system, and what happens when the system breaks down?
Exactly. So it would be interesting to see, how would obviously, the rich against the poor. Like, there'd be so much topics and themes that would be explored in this one, and I want it to be raw. Do you know what I'm saying? And I think a lot of the times, of course, we live in a cancel culture, so I don't think there would be a production company that would, that would kind of show, that would convey what an actual civil war would be like, because they'd be afraid of actually getting cancelled with some of the stuff that they show. But yeah, that's
concerned about upsetting everybody, and then nobody wants to watch the movie. Right, I think something similar to Alex Garland's Civil War would happen, which is where each camp wants to have their point of view validated by the movie by showing how bad the other side is, and then if the movie doesn't do that, then they don't go.
I think the reason why people won't go is because there's always good in humanity. Do you know what I'm saying? So I think we should concentrate on the good in humanity when it comes to the Civil War. So we show from their perspective, but we still show from the other, like the evils of humanity as well. So we show that, but mainly the vehicle of the film will be the good of society, trying to kind of like survive and work its way around in a civil war environment.
Mm-hmm.
But so I don't sensitive, really, really sensitive people wouldn't watch it, but I do think, there is that intrigue of what, especially, I don't think has there been like a Civil War film in England, as in like a film based in England, especially London?
Not since the 10th century.
a film.
No, well, there was. That's the War of the Roses. That's the Anarchy. There's been stuff like this, but it's like goes back to medieval times.
Okay.
And I'm sure somebody's made a movie about the Anarchy, for instance.
Okay, yeah, that's years ago. I'm talking about like.
But in modern times, no.
Yeah,
That's
exactly.
kind of the defining feature of modern Britain, right? That it managed to. I think it's the only European country without a revolution.
Oh wow!
Right, because they managed to slowly transition into modernity, and that is why we have all of these seemingly archaic institutions that, like, as a foreigner find very strange and very amusing sometimes. But they are here because it's the most successful monarchy, probably aside from the Japanese one, in terms of being able to survive into modernity and survive the death of its own system. So I think a movie like this could be really interesting to kind of get to the core of what makes a country and a culture tick. And that is bound to upset everybody if you do it honestly and intelligently.
That's what, and I think it should be. I think a film like that should go straight to streaming. So you have the choice, Zane, and it could end up blowing up as well from streaming. So you're not gonna have the fear of, you're not gonna have the fear of, okay, this is wanna scare away the audience, so we're not gonna make money from this film. No, you're already gonna, you know what I'm saying, it's gonna be on streaming. So I do believe it could generally be successful because people will appreciate the accuracy of it. They'll be like, oh, they did not hold back when it comes to this, because there is an audience out there that's kind of like, I wouldn't say they're sick of cancel culture, but they are kind of like sick of people not using common sense when it comes to cancel culture. Like they can appreciate, and they know how to kind of like separate themselves from facts, if that makes sense. You know how a fact's presented, and hopefully you guys understand what I'm saying. But yeah, they can kind of separate themselves from what they're seeing in the film, and know, it might be a scene which might offend them, but at the same time, it's a fact based on statistics or whatever. But they know how to kind of separate themselves from someone's perspective.
Mm. It has to be sincere and has to win people over.
I was going to say, I was just thinking about it because I know you were talking about like the violence and stuff like that within the movie. Like, we don't have guns over here. So like in America, like, you have guns and you can shoot people or whatever like that. And it's like, it can be gory, but it's probably less violent than a society that not everyone has access to guns unless you're a farmer or you're like, special armed police officers or whatever like that. So in an instance where it's tipped over, it's gone over the boiling point and everyone's completely like savage and is like fighting the other side, that has the potential to be very gruesome and very bloody, because you're now using sort of improvised weapons. You're getting like bats, or you're using knives and stuff like that. A lot more like gory and stuff like that. So that would be, for anyone that's sort of into strong violence in their shows, this would probably be that. Like, this would be a setting where you would get a lot of that.
You could just copy paste like American tropes, right? You would have to really think about how would this unfold in this particular place.
Yeah, because it wouldn't be like
it at all.
Yeah, it wouldn't be like in Civil War where you roll up to a petrol station and then there's just 3 guys sat there with guns and you're like tense immediately. It would be, you roll up somewhere and then there's people there and they have like weapons, and then maybe you feel like you feel maybe less threatened because you have your own weapons as well, and it's just like a straight fight to whoever wins or whatever. So it would all play out sort of completely differently, like you said.
Definitely. Yeah. Oh,
you could do like a series, and each season is a different country.
Yeah, that would be good. That would be good. I would definitely be intrigued to see that, because you see different perspectives and how yeah. Cool guys. Goddamn, we went overtime for this one, but everyone at home, I hope you enjoyed today's episode, today's discussion. Hervé, do you wanna do your little plug-in?
Yeah, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.
Thank you, guys. We will catch you next week. We hope you enjoyed. Let us know what story you would like to see on your screen. Over.
Bye-bye.
Ciao.